By the way, here, you can have this.
Oh, thank you.
Not either, so between the two of us, we'll be fine.
Okay.
What are you going to ask me first?
Do you want to talk about your own personal background, or should I launch right into the journalism panel?
It's my birthday today.
Is it? Okay, we'll do that first. That's nice. Hi, my name's Joellen Kaiser, and I'm here at the National Conference for Media Reform with Steve Katz, the publisher of Mother Jones. Steve, I understand it's your birthday today.
It is. I decided to celebrate my birthday here at the National Conference on Media Reform. What better place to be, right?
Absolutely. How did you end up coming to Mother Jones?
Well, I started reading Mother Jones back in the 70s when it first came out, and thought it was just one of the best pieces of journalism I'd ever seen. And then some years later, in the early 2000s, I met former publisher Jay Harris, and we got a conversation going. And besides the fact that we sort of dressed alike, I really thought that some of his ideas and where the magazine was headed was really exciting to me. And so I started working with Jay back in 2003. And then when Jay went on to bigger and better things about a year ago, the board asked myself and my co-manager Madeline Buckingham to manage Mother Jones into the next era.
Smart choice.
Thanks, Joe.
You're doing a panel here at the conference called "On Old School Journalism Moving into the Future,"
right.
And it's fun that you're calling yourself old school journalism and you're moving into the future. I understand you got a massive bump in February, so that you're sitting pretty right now. Tell me about that, and tell me about the vision for the future.
Well, there are a couple of things going on. I mean, over the last few years, Mother Jones has really worked hard to reinvent ourselves as a digitally oriented journalism organization. We'll keep publishing a magazine. We've got 215,000 people or so who buy the magazine every year, and a solid community there. But the really amazing growth for us and the impact of our reporting has been online, whether it's to our website or through our Facebook community or our followers on Twitter. And in the last few months, partly because of creating opportunities for ourselves to reach people and do really good quality reporting, and also because I think people in the wake of the midterm election last fall really are looking for different sources of information again. I think there's a real sense of concern and outrage and looking for new solutions and ways forward. That mix of inside work that we've done and outside search that folks are doing has brought together in an amazing growth in our traffic online in the last 2 or 3 months. And we had 3 million people come to motherjones.com in February and another 2 million in March. And that's many, many, many times what we've had in the past. And it's stayed that way. And that's what's so interesting, is that we've reached a threshold audience with our own reporting and outreach that seems to have really changed the ballgame for us. And I think a big part of this has to do with the kind of reporting that our folks are doing these days, whether it's covering what was happening in Wisconsin and having a reporter in Madison at the state capitol through the entire time that the capitol was occupied, whether it was doing following tips that our readers and viewers were sending us about some of the outrageous proposals to restrict women's right and access to abortion, and writing stories and then making those available to organizers and activists. Whether it was doing a series of what we call explainers about what was going on in the Middle East, so that we could understand and then share with our audiences what we were finding out about the best sources of information. All of those things seem to come together in the last 4 or 5 months with this result of really tremendous growth.
Well, it sounds like you're providing what the mainstream media isn't. I mean, the mainstream media has this tendency now to only look for interview like the top politicians and not do investigative reporting anymore, and it sounds like you're doing that.
Well, this is one of the things we'll be talking about at our panel tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock in the waterfront room. And I think that the clearest example of that in the last few months has been the absolute abysmal failure by the main newspapers and broadcast channels of record to properly and adequately cover what happened in Wisconsin. So the consequence of that was that organizations like Mother Jones, Free Speech, The Uptake, The Progressive, The Nation, Democracy Now!, lots of bloggers, lots of individual Facebook posters and tweeters. That was the media base for getting the story out about what was going on in Wisconsin. You couldn't really count on New York Times or the Post or any of the cable channels. They'd parachute in, do a little story, get half the story right, and then leave again. So I think what we saw again in Wisconsin was, in terms of the activism side, people realizing they need to take the future into their own hands. And from the journalism side, another moment in time where we realized the real value of an independent press that covers stories that people really care about.
Tell me also, I understand that you've become interested in connecting the stories to actual activism and getting your community more engaged in doing something about the news that you're telling them.
Well, Mother Jones has a dual mission, and always has from when it got started back in 1976. And part of it is just an absolute commitment to the highest quality fact-check journalism that we can provide. And every story that we do gets fact-checked before it gets published in print or online. And that's baseline. That's essential. But we're also a mission-driven organization and are built on a set of values around progressive social change and social justice that really guide the kinds of stories that we choose to cover, that we think are important, that we work with our reporters and bloggers on discussing. And so from the beginning, we've always wanted our reporting to have an impact beyond the story itself. It's like the real work begins after the story gets published. And frankly, in the past, it's been sort of accidental whether that happens or not. And so what we're working now on in the next year and a half through the election cycle, through November 2012, is really to be more intentional about that, to design approaches to our reporting, particularly around political issues and the intersection between corporate power and political democracy, so that we increase the chances that our work will be more valuable and more useful to people, taking it out into their communities and really organizing around it. And we saw this recently again, a couple of stories where we were covering Republican attacks on reproductive rights and restriction of access to abortion, where our reporting was picked up by online activists. It became a baseline, a set of facts that people could then use to organize their digital communities. It got enough noise so that the larger women's organizations joined into this campaign, whether it was NARAL or Planned Parenthood, and elevated the noise level again, such that it was picked up, it kind of crossed over into the regular media, the stories in the Washington Post or the New York Times. At that point, it became necessary for political leadership, particularly in the GOP, to respond. And what we saw was this cycle of change from good reporting that's focused on an issue that people care about through the activist community, beyond into the regular media, and then forcing into a political change.
That's a fantastic model. When you study the history of journalism, you know that in the 19th century, most journalism was not objective. It was mission-driven, it was political, and then we had this brief period of super objective, the journalist doesn't really take sides kind of journalism. I'm wondering if you think that there's a pendulum swing back to, journalists with a point of view, and if that is a good thing, or if you think that's a good thing for journalism.
Well, I think the ethical foundation of journalism is shifting based on both the fragmentation of audiences, the decline of a kind of common set of shared media outlets, which I grew up with, 3 broadcast channels, 2 papers of record, that was it. Now the audience is fragmented. People actually have many more choices for where they're going to get their information on the one hand, and on the other hand, so the notion that a reporter cannot take a position and cannot make his or her own points of view visible is gone. And so the responsibility of the journalist now is not to do a he said, she said kind of reporting, but rather to stick to the facts, adhere to the the highest standards of reporting, but at the same time make transparent what it is that they care about, so that a reader or a viewer can make their own decision about, do I trust this source of information or not? And that I think that's actually a good thing. The challenge, though, and really where the problem is that it puts an enormous responsibility on the viewer, on the reader, to make that judgment. And so what, to me, the question then becomes a question of enhancing media literacy in a democracy. And we're kind of right back to the Jeffersonian notion of what a free press does to inform a citizenry so they can take responsibility for their own actions. Now, that also includes an informed citizenry that understands how the media works and where they're getting their news from. And that we're not prepared for that. That is a big issue. It's kind of going back to civics, in a sense, in high school and elementary school. So.
Absolutely, and I think it's a big issue too, because how people get that information is really changing. I unfortunately have a lot of friends who say, well, I don't read newspapers, I don't watch the news, and I had a friend who just didn't even know what was happening in Wisconsin. I said Wisconsin, he had no idea. He thought, cheese, what is this? So I'm interested in whether you think that the solution is going to be mobile, video. What is it? How do we reach people who are not actively searching for news?
Right. Well, at least your friend wasn't thinking about Brett Favre, so there was some advance on that. I don't have a really good answer for that, other than to say that what we realized some years ago is that we need to be where the people are, and so wherever they're getting their information, we want to be there. And if that means having an active mobile presence for folks that rely on their phones, we want to be there. If it means going on Facebook and really pushing out that way, because that audience is very different from the audience that comes to our website, which is completely different from the people who read it in print. So the responsibility of a publishing organization like ours is to be everywhere and do that intelligently, so you can make payroll.
Yeah, I said small goal. Yeah. I hadn't been planning to ask you this, but I wonder if you have thoughts about like the Apple newsstand, and what I know a lot of publishers are really concerned that one of the big ways of getting out information is going to be these tablets, and that there might be a very narrow pipeline to them.
Well, Mother Jones is a hybrid organization. We're a publishing organization that accepts advertising, and we have subscribers to the magazine. It looks and smells like a regular publishing shop, but we're also a not-for-profit organization, and a lot of our revenue comes from people who make contributions every year. So last year I think we had 27,000 people who made a contribution to the organization. And what that has meant for us, this is by way of answering your question, what this has meant for us is that we have to pay a lot of attention to the community of readers and users around us. This is not just an economic transaction. They're making donations or they're subscribing to the magazine for another reason besides just paying a cheap amount of money for a magazine. And so when I look at the Apple platform for publishers, if I were a commercial publisher, I would be really worried. I think it's not a great platform, and particularly because of the way that Apple would not release information about who the purchaser of the subscription is unless that person designates it so. For us, that's not as big a problem, because for our online publication work, what we do is we invite everybody in. You can get our stuff for free.
I see. So we only have a few minutes left, okay. A few seconds left, so I wanted to know if there's anything else you wanted to say before we say goodbye.
Well, I just want to say thanks to Free Speech Television. They're doing a great job. Really great to have you guys here and covering this whole conference. And it's a very, very important issue. Net neutrality and media reform is the sleeper issue of the decade. So I'm really glad to be here. And congratulations to you, Joellen, on your new position as director of the Media Consortium, too.
Well, thank you, Steve. And once again, happy birthday, Steve Katz from Mother Jones. Thanks.